You are watching and listening to Chris and Leicester Till I Die TV on YouTube and your favourite podcasts.
Hi everybody, Jerry Taggart here. Now be sure to watch Chris and Leicester Till I Die TV by subscribing on YouTube and following them on social media for all the latest Leicester City news and information. Come on you foxes!
Of the net.
You are watching Leicester Till I Die TV with Chris and Chums. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Pinterest. All you need for everything Leicester City FC.
Right, Chris.
All right there. All right at the back. How are you? Good evening. Nice of you to join us. It's a pleasure to see you. You are so much better than last week's audience. How are you? How are you? A double night for me tonight. And my wife used to say, yeah, you can never do two in a night, Chris. There, you should have stuck with me, you see. How are you all? How the devil are you? Welcome along to a brand new show that we've got this evening. You may remember we had this guy on quite a lot last season. He really knows his stuff. Fox Julian Watts, and he's going to be here with us, work and personal life, allowing every Tuesday at 9 o'clock to discuss all things football, because I'm a fan and I see things as a fan does. Professionals see it probably better than us, to be honest with you, and certainly fairer. Good evening to Ankit. How are you, sir? Thanks for joining us. Get over to his channel, Ankit Blues FC. It's a great channel. He does cricket as well, but don't let that put you off. Don't let that put you off. I've got to say one thing about cricket. It's probably not as bad as golf. Didn't say that out loud, did I, Julian? We've managed to get him out the 19th hole. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, Chris. You all right?
I am very good again. Thank you very much. Terry, I'm glad you've come back. Hello again. Hi, Julian. I hope you've got changed. I got changed from earlier, just so it looks, more professional. Terry, I forgot to put your last message up to Brad. So you're gonna. Terry's got an amazing dog story about Brad, but I don't think we wanted to go too far down. It involves a lamppost, I think. So we'll leave it as that, shall we? But every week we're going to be looking back at the past week. We're going to do a bit of a catch-up this week with it being the first one, but looking at all things, I say, Leicester City from from a professional's point of view. Because like I say, you do see things sort of differently than us fans.
I think so, Chris. Yeah, when you're involved in the game, obviously you do get a very, very different perception of it and probably understand it a lot better. And that's without being rude. But you've got different eyes on it and you pick up on different things. And I think with you're not always looking at the ball, which I think supporters are always looking at the ball and watching that. Sometimes as footballers, you're sort of looking around and seeing what's happening around the ball. So sometimes we can spot a few things differently, but it doesn't mean to say that we know any more.
Oh, you do. Believe you me, you do. Well, let's get in, and we're going to break it down into a few sections. And at the end, if anybody's got any questions for Julian about Leicester or what's happened in football this past week, stick it in the comments, and we'll try and bring a few up at the end if you've got any at all. We're going to start with this. So it's sort of got my me spitting my dummy out the pram. Leicester start to the season. We're currently down there in 14th at the moment. Arsenal sort of are above us. And we've been screaming out as fans for a bigger squad, for extra cover for Jamie Vardy, cover at the back because, we want Chilwell went and Fuchs has now left. We've now got that. We've gone out and made these new signings. But like I say, 14th, this time last year, we were fourth, and this, it was fifth, I think. And before that, the season before that, we were fourth. And no disrespect to the teams we've played, but at the start of the season, I looked at that and thought, wow, what a great start. we can. There's teams there that we can get points against. Wolves. All right, we did, but it was very, very lucky. West Ham. Well, let's be honest with you. The less said about that game, the better. Norwich. I mean, to say where Norwich are, we scraped past them thanks to sort of VAR. All right, Man City beat us, but I think we actually played well. Brighton. It was difficult to beat Brighton, 11 men are ref and VAR, but we'll come on to that later. And we were lucky against Burnley. And for me, I look at that start and say, there are teams we should be beating. What's going to happen when we come up against the Chelseas and the Liverpools and the Man Uniteds? Would you not have expected, looking at that and looking at our past couple of seasons, that we should be sort of a lot higher up than we are?
I would. We've especially with the summer, with the FA Cup and the Community Shield, what great, performances and results there were. And then it was, I think it's all the hopes and the expectations we had, even though we sort of slightly dipped out on last season. We were all expecting a much quicker start. And I don't think we've got going, if I'm honest with you. One of the things that I think that stands out for me so far, and I've only had limited viewing to some of the games, is that we were sort of forced into a formation last season, and it worked really well for us, especially in that middle bit of the season when we struggled with the injuries. And I think it was only against Millwall the other night that we actually went back to it. And it's been, for me, is that the main reason? It may be not. There are other reasons to it. Obviously, we had the Perez sending off and things like that happen in games, and they change the course of games, but we don't really seem to know what formation we want to play. We've started off with a 4-2-3-1, we've gone to a 4-3-3. We've had a one go at a 4-4. It was a 4-4-2, but it was like Maddison in behind. And then eventually last night against Millwall, we go to the 3-5-2. And albeit it's Millwall, but it's a clean sheet and we score 2 goals, with a weakened team. So, yeah, it's a bit underwhelming of a start. We have to bear in mind that Premier League is a fantastic league. We have to bear in mind that West Ham finished ever so strongly last year, and also Brighton have started really well this year. Yeah. I mean, that could just be a flash in the pan, and we'll see how far that goes for them. So the two teams that we've struggled against that we thought would be are maybe in a better place than us form-wise. But for me, it's finding the right formation that suits the players that we've got. And when you've got the likes of Barnes and Perez, it is difficult in the 3-5-2. But sometimes you have to find the best formation and maybe disappoint one or two of your so-called star players.
I mean, this is it. I mean, I asked the question, two parts to a question, really. Does Rodgers have his favourites? And as in, we Perez, and I think it was Rob Tanner from The Athletic that said to me, Perez probably isn't as bad as a lot of players think he is, but he's maybe not as good as Brendan thinks he is. But does he have his favourites, or is he just unable to drop? And I've seen, yes, he dropped Maddison on Saturday, but are some players undroppable under Rodgers?
They shouldn't be, but I mean, no. I think one of the things that we get with managers is when they spend a lot of money on a player, it is a statement where you've done your homework, you've brought that player in, you've spent the club's money and a lot of it, and you probably think you need to give him that loyalty, to come through and show that they're worth the money and show that your judgment's right as much as anything else. Many a manager has probably been dismissed on the fact of one or two bad signings because it stands out like a sore thumb that, they're making these decisions, bringing these players in. And if they've been a total flop, and I'm not saying that, Perez has, but I do think it is finding that position for him, because I've always thought Perez is a classic number 10, as is Maddison. Probably can't have two in a team unless you really rejig the formation. And at the moment, I mean, the other week we played a 4-3-3 with Maddison in the top three. I really don't see how that works either, because playing a 4-3-3, I'm not sure where you can play Maddison unless it's in the middle three. But I think we need to have that strength that we had, I think, with Tielemans and Ndidi and maybe Samari. So, it's difficult to place him there. And he made the brave decision on Saturday to not play him. And I think he's going to have to find, he might need to do a bit more of that, because behind that, it seems that the team fairly, more or less picks itself, and it's just getting that top edge right. And, and we're not scoring a lot of goals, and that's the place on the pitch where it really isn't working for us so far.
And I think Daily Mail said, as many as Jamie Vardy scoring at one end, it's not hiding the problems we've got in the defence at the back. And I know we have got defensive problems. Evans doesn't look like he can string 2 games together this season, with his illness. And, he's no spring chicken anymore. Fofana was, unfortunate because of the... what's the word I'm looking for? He was unfortunate. Well, I say injury. It was more like a hacking down in the Villarreal pre-season. But we had worse injuries. We had more of our back 4 out last season than we have this season. So I can't see that as being excused. But you made a very good point earlier that we had a good formation that possibly Newcastle apart did us well at the back end of last season. We had Barnes was injured, Maddison was injured, and we've got, we had to play Inacho and Vardy up front. And my God, didn't they do well?
Yeah.
To copy Bruce Forsyth saying, but why suddenly then, as up until the Millwall game, Inacho had 89 minutes. And I didn't time that. I actually read it somewhere. He had 89 minutes this season. He was our top scorer last season. How does a manager go from having that brilliant, formation, which he stumbled on? It wasn't the greatest tactical decision he made. He stumbled on it because of injuries, to then saying, well, I'm going to bring these players back. And I go back to is Maddison brought back in just because he's Maddison and Barnes, when... no matter how good you are, if the team's performing without you, you wait to get your chance.
Yeah, I sort of agree with that. And again, it goes back to the thing about the players and the formation. Is it the fact that, those players do come back? Because without Barnes and Maddison, you play the other formation and you're not really upsetting anybody, and you're not having to move anybody around because you've got your 2 strikers, you've got your 3, midfield players behind that. And it was a nice and strong formation. And that's the puzzling thing. But sometimes managers do prefer a certain way of playing. They'll have the way they set up against teams. And, and if it is the 4-3-3 or is it the 4-2-3-1 as we started, and the players coming back in did fit into that. But I think at some point you've got to see what's not working now and what worked for us last season. And again, I know we've had the injury problems at centre halves, and I'm not really one for playing players out of positions, but we're talking about real top-class professional footballers here. I'm sure Ricardo could play on the right of a back 3 very, very comfortably. We've got then Castagna, and we've got, either Bertrand or Thomas on the other side, and we could go with that 3. So I do think there are, or Castagna could maybe do that. I don't think that's difficult for a very good fullback to fit into that role either side of a decent centre-back. So that, for me, would be one thing I would be looking at, right now. Obviously, we're hoping that, Evans can sort of string some games together. I think Vestergaard's probably had a shaky start, if I'm honest, looking at some of the goals we've conceded. But that for me is the immediate area, the formation, and looking at that back 3 and how it would find it most comfortably. Give us that solid formation that we can go and win games from.
Yeah, and I agree totally. And I mean, Vestergaard wasn't somebody, I know we'd been looking at him, we've been linked at him for a few years, but I think it was an emergency buy, given the fact that Fofana had got injured when he did. And it was nice to see that we went out and got somebody in. Soyuncu, it hasn't helped. Soyuncu's had a bit of a bad start as well, to put it mildly. It looks, and Craig said this, it's almost, because I was saying, I don't know, let me ask you this, Julian. As a player, when you're having a bad run of games, like, say, Soyuncu is, or Maddison was, do you want, I say you want to be dropped, that's wrong, but should a player be dropped to maybe given sort of a bit of time away from the crowds, or should he, as with Brendan, he's just tweaked it by moving Soyuncu over to the right, and it seems to have sort of almost made him a better player because he's had to concentrate on the basics.
Yeah, I think, that's the manager's, it's a big call for the manager. And I think a lot of it depends on the player, because someone could be suffering a little bit with the confidence, having a few bad games or making mistakes, not having bad games, but making mistakes in games that can be costly. I know all about that. If his confidence is at a low ebb and then you pull him out, it can really send him further the wrong way. And it might be that you need to persevere with him. And that's where, for me, a good manager is a man manager, and he will recognise that. or he will recognise that he can say to a player, listen, you're having a bad time. Let me just take you out of the firing line for a bit. We'll be okay for a couple of games. You're definitely going to come back in because you're in my plans, and make him feel wanted. I've got a perfect example with myself when I was at Luton with Lenny Lawrence, who was a fantastic manager for myself, and I had 2 games on the bounce where I had like 10 or 15 minute spells in both games where I made a couple of mistakes and I was a bit shaky, and he pulled me into the office and just went, some managers would have dropped you by now. And he said, you're one of the cornerstones of the team. You just need to play through it. I've got every faith in you, blah, blah, and he did a bit of speech for 15 minutes, did me the world of good. And I went on and had probably one of my better playing seasons, but another manager might have dropped me, and that's the difference of the manager recognizing, where you are. At the time I was 30, so I was old enough to get over it myself. And again, it depends on the player's age. When they are younger, it is a lot more difficult, and you don't want to let them drown in if the team's having a bad time and the results aren't great, they can take all that pressure on themselves, as well as their performance has not been fantastic, because they would know themselves, and then it can be a bit overwhelming.
And how, we've heard the booing at the end of the game, unfortunately, at the weekend. And I don't like booing personally, because, whether a player's playing good or bad, they don't set out to play bad. But, Maddison didn't get a very nice welcome onto the pitch when he was brought on for Lookman. How does that affect you as a player, or are you able to switch off and ignore it?
You hear it, Chris, and again, it's really, really down to you. And if you are having a bad time, it can, it's not the greatest thing in the world, obviously, to come onto the pitch into that situation. And some players have got that supreme confidence where it just bounces off them and they really don't care. And some players, they'll take it to heart, for the try and bit harder, and they can come through the other side. But I think we've seen over the last 20 years, there's an odd player or two that's been to Leicester that it hasn't quite worked for. And, it's a sorry tale for them. And I think as players who've been to a few clubs, there's a couple of players like Walsh, Leicester all his life. But I know for myself, 4 or 5 clubs that you'll look back on a period and go, that wasn't great then. That club for me, didn't work out. That one did. That was great, but that didn't. And there's a lot of players who'll go through that experience in life. And I think it's a funny one because, the supporters feel like they want to vent their anger. They want to vent the frustrations. We've had a fantastic last 5 years or so, and the expectations, whatever we try and do, however we try and calm things down and say, listen, we're Leicester, it's a project, we're building. The fans still see that we're pushing for Champions League. We've won the FA Cup. We've won, the Community Shield, and it just lifts everyone up. And they can't hide the disappointment, but it really is such a negative effect on the pitch, the fans. But I understand that, they work all week and they come, to support the team. And if they feel like people are underachieving, then, it's a difficult one for, pill for them to swallow. But I never feel that players aren't trying hard. I think sometimes they can be in a bad place and a bit of bad form, and it might mean that they don't really want the ball as much, and they're not making the right movements to get in that position to get on the ball. But seriously, the fans don't help that. But I understand both sides.
I totally, doing this, and when I do this all the time, I'll criticise players as much as the next ones. As fans, if you go to the ground, you're paying your money to see it, and as fans, you're. I say I don't live in Leicester, so I don't have a season ticket now, but I buy the shirts. I probably buy all 3 shirts every year, so I commit to the club. But during the game and whilst I'm in the stadium, I'm 100% behind whatever player, because nobody in any job goes out and goes, you know what, I'm going to have a stinker today. I'm not going to bother, or if you do, you soon found out and got away. But just to finish on this bit on the start to the season, like I say, and you pointed out there, the more success you have, the higher expectations rise. And, we've gone from, if you like, FA Cup winners to Premier League mediocrity in quite a few months. But in the past seasons, we were always looking over our shoulders, who's coming up behind us. We were in that top 4, top 5 for every week, apart from, unfortunately, the week it counted, the last week of the season. This season, yes, we've got the new players in. Yes, expectations are high, but we're now going to have to come ourselves from behind. Do you think that will sort of, in some ways, be less pressure?
It is. The only thing that I hope doesn't happen, and in where we are now, we're really sort of stuttering, I think is the best word for it. Like you say, we struggle across the line against Norwich, who you think we should beat comfortably, as hopefully, you know, most top sides should go there and beat them comfortably. You know, they're a team, they know exactly where they are, but we should go to Carrow with all the confidence in the world and come away with a better result than we did. And you would hope that rut doesn't continue, because then that can actually feed into the players' minds, where every game that isn't a great game, it can just ebb a bit more into the confidence, not just of individuals, but as the team as a whole, and you can find things a bit, you know, edgy. But if we can push through that, then it's a matter of, obviously, the new players bedding in. You know, a couple of good signings in there. You know, Lookman, I've been a fan of, and I think he brings something else to the team. And once Brendan gets the formation sorted, which he's happy with, and it might be one that he's got now, and it's just not clicked yet. You know, Maddison's a great player. You know, he's had injuries last season. You know, he needs to bed himself in again, as do all the players, and get back to it. And hopefully then there we can begin to look forward and then start to claw points back. And like you say, you know, we're chasing people then and not worried about what's behind us.
Exactly. Unless we get really dragged into a relegation fight. I agree with you with Lookman. I mean, you know, we've got the big names, the Dakas and the Sumaris and what have you, but and I want to get excited by Lookman, but what's holding me back is the fact of, do we get too excited by the start for Under? And then we found out that after 4 or 5 games, he'd peaked and gone down. But Lookman, no pun intended, looks the business.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Lookman, it's a different scenario, because we've not seen Under in a Premier League team. I think, you know, Lookman's been in a Premier League team that's got relegated, so they've been up against it week in, week out. And to be fair, he pretty much shone in that team week in, week out, which is really difficult. And there's a side that is battling every week to not concede. It's a totally different mindset to a top team in the league. You know, Pep Guardiola team, as we all know, they just go out and say, how can we win this game? At the other end of the league, it's like, you know, we really don't need to concede. The game plan is don't concede, stay in the game. But his ability, I think, more often than not, shone through. So in trying circumstances like that, I think he's looked a good player. So just on the back of that and the bits I've seen of him in a Leicester shirt, I think he's going to be a really good signing. Yeah.
I'm also the one I think could be the signing of the summer for us, and that's Ryan Bertrand. Because I think he's come in, he's free, but he's got the experience. He can get the ball past the first player at free kicks and corners, which is something we've lacked. And, you know, in those sort of pre-season games where there was no crowds, you could hear him, you know, shouting and talking. And it's that leadership and that experience when we've not got Johnny Evans that, you know, he'll stand up and do that.
Yeah, I think he's a very good signing. And as soon as he was mentioned, I thought, if we could get hold of him, that's a fantastic bit. No one better for Luke Thomas to learn from, and obviously, you know, hopefully play, maybe not alongside, but alternating, but, you know, learning from watching him and, you know, and coming into games himself. I mean, one of the ones I would have liked in the summer, I know people might think he's a bit past his best, but I would have liked Cahill to, you know, to come in, because if we're losing Johnny Evans, who's experienced, Cahill's got the same experience and a similar kind of player for me. You know, and I know he's gone from Chelsea to Palace. I still thought he did a good job at Palace, and I think his experience would have been invaluable now, where you've got a new signing and Sayunchu, you know, and there's a lot of youth in there where it might have needed just that older head who's been there and done it, just to talk through the game, like you've just mentioned with Ryan Bertrand. And I think he said he had Premier League offers, but I'd be amazed if Leicester went in for him and he said no and went to Bournemouth instead. So obviously offers that did come in didn't really float his boat, but I thought it was a big shame that we didn't make a pitch for him. And he might have only played 10, 15, 20 games this season, but they could have been vital games for us, and it might have given us a bit more stability in the start we've had. But I mean, that's just, you know, hearsay. And
I can understand him coming to Bournemouth in a way, because I live down here. So I mean, it's a beautiful part of the country. So if he fancies nice golden blue flag beaches and not too bad of weather, not talking about today, then, you know, he's welcome down here. I agree with you 100%. I think he would have been perfect. Maybe we were offering him, if we did offer him a contract, a long enough one,
Yeah.
But then, with I would have sooner had him on as a free, because Vestergaard is probably not going to play all the games. Once Fofana's fit, we know he's going to come back in. But yes, Vestergaard's got the Premier League experience, but Cahill could have just brought so much to the team. We're getting a few questions coming, which I say we'll save up until the end. Anthony, good evening. So how the devil are you? I know you're a Leicester fan, but was told you had a soft spot for Arsenal. I do have a soft spot for Arsenal. It's a swamp at the bottom of the garden, so that's where my soft spot is. Matthew, good evening. So how the devil are you? He's in Dublin tonight. Oh, having a few pints of Guinness, eh? Knowing you, Matthew. Well, not if you're driving, obviously, but hopefully you parked up somewhere and got a few. So moving on to topic number 2. One thing that I have been really having a few rants about, so much so that I've had to create a special section for the post-match show called Chris's Rants, but it is VAR. Now, we can argue about individual decisions till the cow comes home, and I think, we've got consistency is lacking, because what was the difference between Villa's goal against Man United that was allowed and, Leicester's goal against Brighton that wasn't allowed? Apparently it was because the linesman put his flag up in our game and didn't put his. But what is the point of having VAR? They should be there looking at the goal. If it's a goal, if it's a penalty, they don't wait for. They should be looking at it anyway. But what my point I want to ask you here, Julian, is and people said to me the other day, said, "Oh, it will even up over the season." Well, it shouldn't, because VAR should be getting these decisions right first time. When we look at the Brighton game, we got the penalty. Not the Brighton game. I can't remember what game it was now. Where we got the penalty against us, and Alan Shearer went absolutely mad as an ex-player, and Dion Dublin in Match of the Day. And I'm confusing myself now because I can't remember which game it was. It wasn't the Brighton game, I'm sure. It might have been, no. Oh, was it Burnley? Anyway, one of them. I can't remember. We're having so many VAR discussions at the moment. Somebody will tell me there was a questionable penalty. I think it was possibly Brighton, actually. And they couldn't believe it as ex-players. So what I am saying here is I don't think there's enough ex-players in the game now. I mean, your Premier League players, your top guys will end up at a Sky Sports, at a BBC, at ESP or whatever. So they're sorted. But there's a lot of guys, and no disrespect to these teams, but there's a lot of guys from the Rochdales, the Oldhams, and the Wycombe Wanderers that don't have a career in football when they leave, but could be sat behind that camera looking at it as Alan Shearer and Dion Dublin did as players. I think it was the handball. It was the handball that we gave, that he was being pulled down, so it couldn't have been a penalty. Alan Shearer saying Dion Dublin as ex-players saw that. Whoever this plonker was behind the camera at VAR, Mr. Banks, he maybe probably hasn't even kicked a ball in his life. Should we be having ex-players, and should we be encouraging ex-players to get that, because they understand the game?
Well, firstly, forget Rochdale, Chris. I'll go and do it myself if I got the chance. If I'm honest, I agree with that, because I think what the guys who are judging on the VAR are really, looking at the instances of the happen, they're actually going 100% by the rule book. And I know that it might sound wrong to go against it, but it's never ever actually that black and white. So the guy who's given that penalty will just see it's hit his hand. Has it hit his hand? Yes, it has. Yeah. He's not even looking, what happened before that. It's just, did it hit his hand? There's another one that if it's in the penalty area and it hits your hand and it stops it going in, no matter what the circumstances. I think it was like the Reece James one with the Chelsea game. Was it Chelsea Man City? I can't remember. He handled it on the line, and he definitely didn't mean to, and it was a red card. Now, that for me, that shouldn't have been a red card. And I think if a player would have watched that, he would have just said, it's a yellow card. It's bounced up and hit him. And it was actually it had already hit him, and then it was going away from him. And that's what they gave it for that second bit of contact. But it was the same with the one, for us guys, Leicester, that there was a clear foul there, and it should have just been a free kick to us. Yes, and then for it to turn on its head and go so much, 180 degrees against us, it's absolutely frightening. I think that's what ex-players get frustrated with is the people that are doing it, and they know the rules, they know football. They've never been in the heat of the moment of a game and that situation, and actually what does go on. And when you get these things into super slow-mo, some things look really, really bad. But we all know that there's a tangle here and there everywhere, and you might sort of see some more consistency, and that's the word that I think we've been using for years. With referees before VAR, and then VAR, and then VAR as it's moved on, because last season it was ridiculous in the amount of stoppage time due to VAR, and then they've sort of made it a little bit better this year. They've got the referees going to the screens a lot more, which I totally agree with, because at the end of the day they're in charge of that match. No one in a studio anywhere, you should be sat there saying that is the decision. They should be saying you need to look at that, which they have done in some cases, but you need to look at that and you need to make that call. But I totally agree. I did watch that match of the day with Dion and Alan Shearer, and they were absolutely right. And like you say, it is that thing of knowing the rules of football, but having been in that situation,
interpretation, isn't it?
Footballer.
Pardon? It's interpretation.
It is, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great word. It's a great word, and like these guys have never been on a football pitch in that position under that pressure in front of that crowd, and they've not got that feel for the game that guys who've played it was. So, I think it'd be a great thing to get ex-players in. I
mean, we've literally got 6 officials at every match. So you've got a referee. You've got 2, what we now call referee assistants, but linesmen. You've got a 4th official, and then you've got a VAR referee and an assistant VAR referee. So there's 6, and they are still getting it wrong. And we know that the linesman, if it's not on his side and he's looking through 2 or 3 bodies, we know it's going to be difficult for him. Same with the referee. And I was a great champion of having VAR. People are saying that VAR is not fit for purpose. I honestly think VAR is fit for purpose. It's just the people that are using it that are not fit for purpose. They always say, don't they, the biggest nut in a car is the one behind the wheel. And it's the same with VAR, because as I say, it's just. And we're not going to, as I say, you don't expect 100% consistency, but we'd like to get over the 50%. And I just think ex-players doing that, you said you'd love to do that. You'd love to be involved. And, you could look at things and make, and I think fans would understand it more. I mean, Brad, who does this show a lot with me, says, if we could hear what they were saying, it would make some difference. I don't think it would, because I think you'd still be peed off, and I know the Burnley decision went against us, or went for us, and the Norwich, it works in our favour sometimes as well. But I've got to be honest with you, I think Burnley were unlucky that goal was disallowed. It was one of those, toenails over the line sort of thing.
Yeah. No, I do agree. And like you say, the decisions should be I think 90 to 95% correct when you can actually freeze it frame by frame, go back over and over again. You've got so many different angles. They shouldn't still be getting it wrong now. I think the problem last year wasn't the getting it right or wrong. It was the time it was taking and a toenail over past his toenail and all the lines on the pitch and then checking things that weren't clear and obvious mistakes. That's another thing that we hear people saying a lot. So there might be half a centimetre in it, but that should just be let go. That's just the game and how quick it is, and we don't want to slow it down too much, which I felt we did last year. It was. It really slowed it down quite a lot. So that's got better. And I think we followed, like I know in Germany a lot, the referee goes over to the screen. But like you say, the decisions for me, they've got to be nearly spot on every single time. Or really, is it as good as we think it is?
I mean, the problem is, I think at the moment, when the referee goes over to the screen, he just sees a still.
Yeah.
That doesn't tell, it's like, what tells you more about something, a picture or a video clip? And the video clip, obviously. So, I mean, Scott, who's one of our presenters, I mean, again, he says that we maybe should have some an opportunity like we do in tennis and cricket. In question, you can challenge certain decisions. Again, I don't know whether we can go down that road or not. But I can say, for me, I'm a great advocate. Let's get the ex-players in. They'd love to do it. You said you'd love to do it. And, there's so many ex-players that we lose to the game that can bring so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I've never understood why they've not offered ex-players the chance to be referees, actual referees, to be honest with you. Is it the fact that you don't want to when you left, or?
I don't know. I mean, after all the surgery I've had, I couldn't get around the pitch, if I'm honest with you. But I think it may be that thing of a player, seeing what it's like to be a referee. I mean, my lad plays junior football, and you're always trying desperately, to encourage these young referees to come through, because it's so difficult for them. And then they get promoted into the men's local Sunday league, and that's sheer hell. And if they get through that, they deserve to be a Premier League referee for me. But
yes. I used to coach my son with one club. I was FA qualified Part 1, which basically is a fancy title for saying an enthusiastic father. And but the abuse I used to get off fathers and mothers from players on my own team, if I gave a decision against our team, was like 5 minutes before we were chatting and asked me if I wanted to go for a drink. The whistle goes and they're effing and blinding at me. I'm like, God, what's going on? One last thing on VAR before we move on is, should VAR, in fact, no, I'll save that. I will save that because it will fit in nicely with it's something that's coming up later. So moving on to number 3, which was Leicester City back in Europe. We've finally got a tough group. We've had let's be honest with you, we had an easy group in the Champions League, an easy group, to be fair, in the Europa League. We couldn't have done better if we picked it ourselves. So this about time we had a difficult group, I think. And, you've got Napoli, one of the favourites to win it. Champions League themselves not so long ago. Moscow and Warsaw, to whom we're going on Thursday. Napoli 2-0 up at some point. At one point, it was all going. I know you've not watched the game, but I know we were at home. But 2-2, I think, was a good result for us.
Well, I've watched it on catch up, and I did in the end, because I thought our game was to contain them, hit them on the counter. The first goal epitomised that totally. Well, even both goals did, in fact. Obviously, the Barnes one at the end where we go and break away, and we soaked the pressure up well. But they did create, it's got to be 5 or 6 really good chances before they scored. So you could see that they had the potential there. They were quite relentless in the way they went about the game. And I think the disappointment is when you're 2-0 up after 60 odd minutes, you're thinking we just, we managed the game a bit better and we see it out, and we just didn't do that. And unfortunately, we conceded the first one, and then the momentum's right with them. And I think at 2-0 we should have maybe changed it a little bit and looked to really, really look after what we'd got. And I think possibly we thought, keep playing the same way, we might break away and get a third. And it didn't go that way. It went totally the other way. So on 2-2 on the night, for the quality of both teams I saw, was for me a fair result, but disappointed that we put ourselves in such a really good position and let that slip, because that would have been a great, start to the campaign.
It would have been. And at 2-0, I was watching it with my son. We were cheering and up and getting in there. It's funny because possession was kind of evened out. I didn't realise this, just having a look now at the stats, that we actually had 7 attempts on goal. They actually had 22. And maybe I was. I did have a beer when I was watching it with my son, but I didn't think I was that drunk. I don't remember them having, but apparently they had 22. But they were shooting all over the place because only 32% were on target. A lot more of ours was on target. But in a way, Napoli, if they were that good, they'd be in the Champions League, to be honest with you. But they weren't the Napoli that I was expecting.
No, they weren't, but they've still got a lot of quality in there. And I think with the shots, I think if you look at the stats on the shots, I can understand that, as you've said it, just because we did defend the box really well. As soon as we got back to the 18-yard box, we were very stoic. People behind the ball, we made it very difficult for them to get anywhere near coming into that area, which for me was the big disappointment with the second goal, which is just a ball in the box and not unchallenged header, but not a great challenge for the header. I mean, that's coming in, and then you're a centre half. You should be just clearing your lines and taking the man with you. So, that was a bit disappointing. But I think up until that point of that goal, we'd really defended the box well, and that would explain, why they only had 32% on target. But I do think they've still got a lot of quality, still probably favourites for the competition. And like I say, it's a shame. It's a good result, but it's a shame it wasn't, the win. But hopefully we'll still progress.
Yeah. Like you say, I mean, they are still a very, and they've got a great start in Italy as well. 2 points I want to sort of end on with Napoli is because somebody said to me, wouldn't you like that you wouldn't like that standard of refereeing in the Premier League? And I went, actually, having the last couple of games, that would have probably be a step up from the sort of refereeing we've seen in the Premier League. But I mean, a red card in the 94th minute, well, a second yellow, if you like. Over-enthusiastic ref, or should indeed he really have not been going for that?
I'm with the ref on this one. I thought it was on a yellow card the most ridiculous thing he could have done as a player. It was, there's no subtlety about it, whatsoever. Irish, no subtlety at all. I think he's always going to get the yellow card. Refs can't afford not to in that situation when it's so obvious. And I mean, and I hate challenges like that. I mean, in our day, it was a lot different, and we could really go through someone and it wouldn't even be a yellow, and the game's sort of changed a lot. But I'm really now getting to hate the deliberate fouls. And as much as I loved the challenge in my day, but we were always hard and in your face and, put them over the touchline. But it was a fair, hard tackle, which you're obviously not allowed to do now. But I'm actually leaning towards these deliberate fouls being red cards because I'm sick of seeing them. I hate time wasting, and I hate when there's absolutely no intent whatsoever, to go for the ball. I think it should be punished more. And the thing is, Chris, is that we always talk about how do we stop diving? How do we stop this? How do we stop these professional fouls? You punish people for them regularly, week in, week out. I've said it before about the diving. You get a panel retrospectively of ex-players, as we've already talked about tonight with the VAR, ex-referees, ex-managers, and you can clear, if it's not clear, then, it goes by the wayside. But you look at a lot of incidents, and if you think he's cheating and you all agree, he's fined a week's wages, he's suspended the games, the wages won't bother him whatsoever. But, the manager's going to get a bit hacked off if he's getting suspended every week for throwing himself on the floor. And you'd soon eradicate it from the game, in my opinion. And it's the same with this professional foul. I just think, make it a red card. Will it last long? No, people will stop doing it because the managers will be going mental that you're getting a red card for such it's a lazy, cheat of a foul for me. And I'd like to see it out of the game.
I was going to save this until the next section, but seeing as you brought it up, I'm getting a bit worried tonight whether I'm getting, I'm no longer the Mr. Nasty of Leicester Till I Die, because I agreed with Brad so much earlier, and I'm agreeing with you with everything here. Yes, totally. Let's cut this out. I mean, I've discovered on ITV4 the Big Match Revisited, and the other night I was watching, or day, whenever it was, Chelsea versus Charlton, actually at the top of the second tier battle. That's how, and Chelsea were actually in the second tier. My God, you hardly heard the refs whistle. No, I know it was only highlights, but there was tackles going in that, it was you'd be sent off these days for, and I'm thinking like the game flowed and the pitch was awful. You couldn't play tippy tappy football on there. But yes, if you see somebody cheating, it's like, let's say, for example, I don't want to give it away for the section we're coming on next, but in the Euros, when that Italian guy, I can't remember his name, went down in the box, suddenly when Italy scored, he got up and ran off to celebrate. You've got everything on VAR. You've got everything on camera, so you can go back and watch the game, and that should be a red card because, yes, like you said, he'll miss a game, You know, make that red card say 1 game. He misses a game, it will soon pee the manager off, like you said. You know, if all his players are missing the card, are missing the games because of this. So yeah, I agree totally that anything that is against the spirit of the game, time wasting, anything like that, get out a red card retrospectively, and it would soon put an end to it.
Absolutely.
Well, we'll come on to that more in a second in the next section, but I just want to touch on your thoughts on if you come third in the Champions League group, you drop into the Europa League. If you come third in the Europa League group, so let's say we come third in our group, we will drop into the conference. I don't think that's fair. We finished second in our group this season, and we are going to be playing somebody that's dropped down from the Champions League, whoever that may be. Now, it might not be, you know, a good team, but like last season, Man United got all the way to the final, were 1 shot off possibly winning it. And don't get me wrong, I love to see British teams doing well. I can't believe I'm saying this, but all joking with Man United fans aside, or banter aside, I would have liked to see Man United win it. I really want them to beat Villarreal tomorrow after what they did to Fofana. But is it right that a team that's failed in one cup competition, which Man United had, could then go on and possibly win the next one?
No, and I think it's this thing in Europe. You know, obviously the Super League came and went very quickly, but it's this thing about looking after the bigger clubs. You know, you've been kicked out of a tournament because you've underperformed or you've not performed as well as your opponents, but we're going to give you another chance because you're one of the top clubs.
Yeah,
and I think it's absolutely disgusting. You're in a competition, you don't perform, you don't qualify, you're out of the competition. That's in every competition in any sport, you know, globally, and yet all of a sudden it's because they're a bigger club and we want to keep them happy. You know, it's well, you can have another crack at the whip. And you know, how can that be a qualification for that competition in the same season? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, but it is this thing I think about the hierarchy, the money in the game, and in giving the, you know, sugarcoating it for one of the bigger clubs who might sort of go out at a stage they didn't expect to go out at, and giving another opportunity to win something else. And it stinks to high heaven, but I don't think it's something me or you are going to change, Chris.
No, I mean, the funny thing is, as far as I understand it, if we finish third, like say we drop down, but if we get through and then play, say, a Champions League team a top team that's just through games as not qualified, but then we get knocked out, we're actually out. Where the team that's finished below us he's going to get a better run. You know,
It doesn't make sense, mate. It really doesn't. But like I say, it starts at the top and trying to look after those bigger teams, and it just really cocks the whole system up for me. So, not a fan of that.
Something else we're agreeing on. Now, thank God this is on tape. It may never happen again, folks. It may never happen again. Now, this one, this may be where we differ. I'm not sure, but I have a soft spot. I lived in Burnley for 20 years. My kids could have been Burnley fans if they wanted. I didn't mind that because they were born in Burnley. They grew up in Burnley. I just didn't want them supporting Man United, Chelsea, or whatever because they were on the telly. But I've lost a lot of respect for Burnley as a club because of this incident in the last game. Maxwell Cornet, gamesmanship or cheat. To me, there's a very thin line. And I had a Burnley fan on last night, and to be honest with you, he was agreeing with me that player knew that he'd pulled something, because you know straight away you've pulled something, kicked the ball out, ran off the pitch. He then came back on the pitch and collapsed. And it was time wasted. One of those scenes where you said they should look back at that and say, "There's a red for cheating."
I don't think we should look back at it, Chris. I think it should be a yellow card. I mean,
well, he did get a yellow card.
You see players now still kicking the ball away, but they think they're being a bit cute and all that. But you know that the whistle's gone. You know, a referee can see if a player's kicking the ball away or not. And for me, it should be a yellow card. And if he has to dish 2 or 3 out, he dishes 2 or 3 out. And again, it stops it happening. But while we let it happen and just say, hey, don't do that again, or I'll tell you not to do it again the next time you do it again. Nothing's going to change. And simple with that, the referee should have walked up to him and said, that's a yellow card. And if he'd already been booked, that's a red card, and off you go, son. And you've cost your team, because he's done it deliberately to give them time to get a substitution on. So, he's the manufacturing the rules. Whereas at the end of the day, if he's off the pitch and he's injured, he should stay off the pitch. So it's his re-entry. I would book him and make that a rule. But again,
in fairness to the referee, and I know we're not been referees fans tonight, but in fairness to that referee, he did actually book him on that occasion. But then Sean Dyche comes out, says, "Oh, he shouldn't have been booked." And he's only just come over to this league. He does, he's like bollocks, to put it bluntly. And then somebody said, he was testing his foot to see if it would, take, how you could do that off the pitch. I mean, Casper went up, and I was actually willing Casper to put his arms under the other guy's armpits and drag him off the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, to say that he's getting used to this country, I mean, the rules are the same, all around the world. So it's just them trying. I mean, all they're doing is sticking up for the player and sort of trying to make light of it, where really they're sort of thinking that we're all mugs if we actually believe anything they've just said, which is where you kind of lose respect for people. I love managers to come on and say how it is. And, I mean, Steve Bruce blames VAR every week. Sean Dyche is a bit, doesn't really sort of admit that something went wrong or a player of his did anything wrong. And I think that's with quite a few of the managers, to be honest. It'd be nice and very refreshing if one came on and said, tactically, we didn't get it right today, or it wasn't, the result wasn't, the VAR wasn't the be all and end all. We were actually beaten on the day by a better team. But if there's any chance of using any tiny, amount of something technical that happened, they'll always point to that. And again, I think it's just ridiculous. But
do you know what? Maybe I'm getting old here, because I am getting old. There's no two ways about it. The person I see in the mirror is not the person that I know is in my head. But I grew up in the 70s, which was sort of not the best year for fashion, but was a decade for fashion. But oh God, I love those flares and platform shoes. I'll tell you, big collars and kipper ties. Yeah, and the pictures are around, and I am slowly destroying them. But it was a good decade for likes of Liverpool. And what I used to like about Liverpool is, yes, they won everything, but nobody particularly hated them like they did, say, Man United when they won everything, because the Liverpool managers, Shankly, Paisley, etc., would come out and say, because I remember Leicester, the season we came up with Jock Wallace, we went straight back down again, but we actually beat them twice. We were the first team to beat them at Anfield for however many years, and the first team to the double over them for so many years. And he actually came out and went, yeah, we deserve to lose. Leicester were the better team. And, I think that's why managers back then had a lot more respect from opposing fans. Like you said, they were honest.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like I've said before, if there's anything they can point to that means it wasn't their fault and it wasn't the players' fault, they point to it straight away. And, I think we're all watching it, and it's like they're treating us like mugs, because we can all see what's happened in the game. And sometimes when they'll contest a VAR decision, I think, well, no, it's black and white, that one. It's actually quite clear, but in their minds, it's not. I mean, and a good example of that, if I'm honest, is the one that you've mentioned earlier, which was our goal getting disallowed because of Barnes.
Yes.
And the Villa, was it the Villa goal that was
the Villa goal against Man United?
The only thing I will say is that if you look where the keeper was, so Barnes was sort of in front of the keeper, but the ball travelled to that post. Whereas the Villa goal travelled to that post, the near post, and maybe he didn't feel he was impeding because Riley was very close to him. He actually wasn't disturbing him to the side of the goal where it went in. So I'm not saying that I should have been disallowed, if I'm honest, but it did look a bit different in that respect, into which way the ball travelled in and where the play was stood, with regards to where the keeper was as well.
No, you're quite right. Well, we're going to have the viewers' questions in 1 second, but we will be right back and do that straight after this.
Leicester Till I Die TV. Please press those buttons on YouTube for more Leicester City content.
It is. We're back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock with the Europa League preview. I'll be joined then by Jason, our new presenter, who's been doing his homework on Legia Warsaw. And I think he's going to find a lot to talk about because they're having a kind of our season at the moment. They are really, really going through a bad time. But Julian, probably, I don't know whether you're looking forward to this or not, but the viewers' questions. There's no dirty ones that I've seen, but let's have a look. So we'll go right back to the start because there was an early question. Where are we? Scott says here, yep, this is where Scott was the first one. Do you feel the likes of Maddison is just low on confidence, or is his injuries playing on his mind?
He doesn't strike me as a person, but yeah, I mean, you never know, really, do you? But he doesn't strike me as a person low on his confidence. He's around the England squad and what have you. Very, very good player. I think, I mean, the facts have been dropped in the way that, like we've talked about the formation already, might play on his mind a bit. The injuries might be playing on his mind. I mean, is it something that is fully over? It's funny with injuries sometimes where it can still be a bit of a niggle a bit later on, or it might not be that, but in your mind, you think it is. And every little knock that you get, you think, is it related to that? So I'm not really sure on that. I think it's more to do with the way we're playing, the chop and the change. And sometimes a player's form can depend on what's going on around him and what his teammates are doing. It's not always, down to him. He's, for me, a very, very talented player. And just let's hope that whatever it is, whether confidence or injuries, he starts to, hit his straps again. But I think it's going to be interesting in how we play. I mean, Thursday night for me, I think sometimes people see the Europa as is it a bit of a hindrance? Does it distract from the league? And right now where we are, I'd be using that match thinking more about the league game on Sunday and how we're going to move forward, because we do need a run of good results, and we've not had that yet this season. There's nothing consistent about us at the moment, and I think it's a perfect match where is the aim to win the Europa League or top four. It's a bit of a difficult one that, because both get into the Champions League, don't they? So,
exactly.
At the moment, what's the likelihoods of a top four? It's the top's looking really tough at the moment. So, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see the formation. Interesting on team selection to see where they go, and for me, I'd like to see a bit more of Dakar.
The only thing I think, for once, the FA's actually made some right decisions, is that if you play in the Europa League or the Conference League on the Thursday, you don't play before the Sunday, so there's no Saturday game. So right. That is something. Talk about the injuries. I suppose when you've had an injury and it's just being human, is you are a little bit worried about setting it off again. If you pulled a hamstring and you think, God, if I run for that ball and it's your first or second game back, is it going to go again?
Yeah. Well, I've had an hamstring injury later on in my life, and when it sort of was a niggling one, and I'd have treatment, and I think I missed a game or two, and then I'd be back. And then I really did rip it to shreds on New Year's Day down at Bournemouth, funnily enough, one very cold New Year's Day after about 15 minutes. And that was me out. I think it was for about 6 or 7 weeks. Wow. But it had been, I could still feel it, but they were telling me that there would be that ache in the muscle anyway. But it was just that moment when I really overstretched with total abandonment, and it absolutely, tore it to shreds. So I've also had a metatarsal injury that actually, the crack in my foot happened 3 times, and on the third occasion they had to put a screw in my foot, which is still in there now. But I mean, it was fine after that. But there was always that worry in my head that I'd done it 3 times. What if the screw didn't work and it would go again? But luckily for me, it didn't. But things like that definitely play on your mind.
I've got to ask. Screw in the foot. Airport security. How do you explain that one?
Yeah, well, I've now got a metal ankle joint as well, just to go on the other side on the right foot. So yeah, it's like the gums come out when I go through the.
Your picture's up on the wall as you go out of Heathrow.
I walk through with my hands up like, come on, search me.
I'm ready for you. Come on. Terry asks here, do you think the fact that we have a shaky defence hits the confidence of the forward players?
It's a good question, Terry. I don't think it I don't think it hits the confidence of them, but what it can do is if Vardy and Perez and whatever think that they're playing well, but the concern is that we can't defend, it can cause a little bit of unrest in the team, and that depends on the dynamics of the team. I was very lucky at Leicester that we really were such a strong group that someone made a mistake, we picked them up. It was an unbelievable camaraderie, mainly because we were out on the lash together most of the time. we got really close like that. But in this day and age, there's a lot of money at stake, and there's a lot of egos in changing rooms now, a lot bigger than 20 years ago. And I think that is one of the dangers. And if you've got a really good group of lads, it doesn't happen. If you've got one or two, bigger egos who are, I want to be playing in Champions League, year in, year out. I want this, I want that. You can all of a sudden, after a run of games, particularly not the odd game, but a run of games of, some players really struggling, and you can sort of get that undercurrent in the team of, he's not doing it and it's costing us, and I've experienced that, not at Leicester, but, at other clubs. So, and that's it's a real sort of dangerous thing that can run through the team. So so to answer your question, Terry, not the confidence, but it can have ramifications on the the mood in the camp and the team itself.
No, I can see that. Scott quickly says here, would you play Barnes, Vardy, and Nacho up front with Samari, indeed, in Tillemans in midfield in a 4-3-3, or possibly drop Barnes for Lookman or Daka?
I think with me, we see other clubs do it, so it's a good question, Scott. I don't like Mason Greenwood playing outside. I think he's a striker, whereas Rashford, I'm not sure he is a main striker.
No.
I think Daka, and Vardy, and Iniacho, for me, they're strikers, and they should be competing for either a place in the top one or the top two. I would actually like to see Barnes and Lookman, because I think they're more natural in that either side. They've both got a bit of quality. They've both got pace. They can both score a goal, so they can cut in and score, as both have shown, particularly Barnes. And so for me, that would be my ideal lineup. And it's I don't. A lot of people, I think Jamie clocks up another birthday, and it's like he's lost his pace. I'm not so sure he has, if I'm honest. I still see that hunger in him and that desire to go and win the ball back and tackle and make the runs in behind more than I think I do any other striker. And I think what we've got at the minute is really exciting. So if it was a three, Scott, to ask the question, for me it would be Vardy, Lookman, and Barnes. But I think I'd be more looking at a two this year, with the fact that we've got the option of Iniacho, who did so well last year again alongside Vardy, and then we've got Daka, who looks like me a really exciting prospect.
Like I say, it could be exciting times ahead. Another one from Scott, and we'll make this the last one. We've done the hour, and he does say it's the last question from me. And this is a really good question, actually. Not that Scott doesn't normally ask good questions, of course, but I do like this question. Do you find that Brendan is better at coaching players rather than making tactical changes? Don't get me wrong, I love the fact we have Brendan, but it's just the thought. And we have heard there's a lot on social media after the game at the weekend. Maybe one or two murmurs against Brendan, but is he a better coach than he is maybe a manager?
Thanks for that, Scott. I hope Brendan's not watching tonight. It's funny. As I talked about it right at the start. For me, it's this. I've always said it about the England managers of the past, the Capellos, and the Ericssons, that they always got it wrong in that they put the best 11 individuals and squeeze them into a formation. In them days, the formation was 4-4-2, and it's a bit different now. But like right now, is Brendan trying to squeeze his best players into the formation when and I think we've touched on before the Perez situation, where he does seem to like him a lot, and again the responsibility that I mentioned earlier of spending the money on him, and for me it looks a bit like that now, whereas I think a manager makes some really tough decisions and maybe leaves out Perez and Maddison and whoever to just get that balance right of what the team's going to be. Is it going back? I'm not saying the back three is the answer, but it just looked strong last year. And Iniacho thrived at the side of another striker. And it would be Vardy to start with if it was those two, and maybe Daka later on the game, who for me is another one like Vardy, who's going to look to get him behind with his pace. He makes good runs. For me, it looks like with 3 strikers who could possibly score as a lot of goals, you really need to have a formation that has a 2 up top, because you're going to rotate the 3 players, and Lookman can play there as well, and I'm sure Barnes could do a job, either side of that. But yeah, so for me, tactically, there may be some questions. I wouldn't question him, because I think he's a very, very good manager. And again, we're probably getting a bit too carried away a bit early in the season, and we're all very, very disappointed on the highs of previous seasons and the expectations that we've carried over. We've all had a bad time in COVID. There's lights at the end of the tunnel. We did well last season. We've got the fans back in the ground. We're all, buzzing for the game again, and it's just not quite happened. So I think you've got to give it another 5 games. Like I say, the 2 European games coming up. I think we've got Palace next, and then the tough one, which is Man United. Two very different games and 2 very good tests in very different ways. So I think in 4 or 5 games, we could then probably sit back here and say, do you know what? It's not going right this season. Or, we've turned the corner. There was some teething problems, a couple of new players, but we've now got it sorted, and, let's build from that. So, I'd like to give it a bit more time on that one.
I must admit, this season has just proved me to say not to know a thing about football. Because I said Brighton would be sort of struggle again this season, and look at them. I said Vieira wouldn't be able to do a very good job at Palace. Look at them. I have predicted Chelsea to win the league, so I might get away with that one. But I also said that this is probably Jamie Vardy's last season as our first choice striker. But like you just said, I don't know. He's just like, you never know. I'm going to sneak this one in as a very last question here. Any plans for a book, Julian? And he says, thanks for your time.
Terry, you're very, very kind. I don't think I've got enough funny stories for a book, if I'm honest with you. So it was I've got to be honest. I always sort of, when people had asked me about, what was my career like, I always just said, it was all right. I did okay. And then as I've got a bit older, it's probably more the age thing than the actual career. But I actually felt, well, do you know what? When I look back, it wasn't that bad, to be honest. I ended up with a couple of medals. I played Premier League football. I was lucky to play in an era of all the Europeans coming over, the Vialis and the Zolas and the Cantonars and, and all that kind of stuff. So I probably did myself down a bit in the early days. So
you've got the chapter purely on setting the shin up, haven't you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure I could string that out to a few pages. Yeah. So, but
a chapter at least, surely. Chapter at least.
Yeah. No plans yet, Terry. But it's a nice thought. Thank you,
Julian. It's been brilliant as always. Thank you so much for coming on. We've already got an idea of one of the topics for next week.
Absolutely.
And we'll be, but hopefully, say subject to everything being all right, we will see you 9 o'clock next Tuesday. Don't touch that dial, as they used to say in my day. Thanks very much. All the best to you and your family, Julian. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. So, I'm surprised. I agreed with a lot of what he said. Or did he agree with a lot of what I said? You could look at it either way, really. I like to probably think he agreed with a lot of what I said. Don't know if I get away with that. Thanks very much for watching. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, we are going to be looking at Leicester City's first away trip of the Europa League. It's not easy for me to say, as we discuss Legia Warsaw versus Leicester. They're having a hard time of it at the moment, maybe just like we are. Could be interesting. And that is at 7 o'clock, and we will see you then. Thanks for joining us, guys. Have a good night now. Good night.
Hello, Matt Elliott here. Be sure to watch Leicester Till I Die TV on YouTube and follow all their social media platforms for all the latest updates and news on Leicester City Football Club.
Thanks for watching Leicester Till I Die. This is Chris saying goodbye, and see you next time.
come to an end. But the fun doesn't have to stop here. If you have any questions, suggestions or feedback, head over right now to Twitter and Facebook and like, share and get involved. Join us next time.